Okay, hello, good morning. My name is Drew Dugan, and today I'll be doing my presentation on E. Cummings and his poem next to, of course, Got America I. Okay, just a little bit of a contextual background about E. Cummings. He was born in October 14th, 1894. He died September 3rd, 1962. He wrote roughly 3,000 different poems. He had quite an extensive background when it comes to that. Again, though, the primary poem of our focus today will be next to, of course, Got America I. Cummings wrote this poem. A lot of people believe he wrote it to be kind of like anti-political, because a lot of the quotings and stuff like this in his poem are kind of like the just the phraseology that a lot of politicians would use while running for politics back in his time. However, the way I took it was completely anti-patriotic, un-American, um, and it baffles me that he, being a veteran, and I'm going to use that term very loosely here, would go on to write something like this. But again, possibly because of his position in the war and not having, extensive war experience, probably swayed him to write this way. Okay, so like I said, Cummings is a veteran. He did serve in World War One. He enlisted in the Army in 1917. He volunteered for the Ambulance Corps. The Ambulance Corps would be roughly as far away from the front lines as you could possibly get. He would simply transport wounded soldiers from one hospital to the next, or uh, take them, like, once they were evacuated off the battlefield, he would pick them up and then again transport to a hospital. Cummings ended up getting into a little bit of trouble when he was in France in the ambulance corps. They actually ended up imprisoning him, thinking he was borderline traitorous, because he often took a company to the French soldiers much more so than Americans. He preferred the company of the French far over America. He fell in love with the city of Paris. He went on to revisit that city numerous times. Um, and like I said, they imprisoned him. He was in prison for roughly about 5 months. Again, with a lot of the letters that he had written home, they were a little sketchy on some of the information that he wrote in these letters. Um, which further, kind of solidifies my ideology on how he was trying to portray this poem. And now we're going to depict it a little bit further. Um, so the way I'm gonna go through and kind of, this poem is roughly 13 lines. It's not very in depth, but I'm gonna go through and kind of depict each line. So his opening line, he says, "Next to, of course, Got America I, love you, land of the pilgrims." The way I'm kind of getting that is he's essentially calling America, us, the land of the pilgrims. But I understand completely that when we originated here, or I'm sorry, when we came over here originally, we were pilgrims, we were settlers. But the way he's kind of portraying this is essentially that we're sheep, um, that we follow blindly, a lot of times without like education, where we're fooled. Like, they put the blinders on us with a lot of these, just this patriotic methodology. That essentially it's a myth, but couldn't be further from the truth. That our patriotism, our willing to fight, is what got us where we are and what gives us what we have. Um, as he goes on further, uh, let's see here. Um, there's a line in here. It says, "By jingo, by gee, by gosh, by gum." He's mocking, where he says "by jingo." That's short for jingoism, which is extreme pride, which we as Americans do have, and we should be proud of that pride, because that pride is what unites us together every time something catastrophic happens. For example, Pearl Harbor, 1941. The 9/11 attacks, you know, Pearl Harbor, 1941, when we banded together, that's what brought us into World War II. 9/11, ultimately, that's what brought us into Iraq and Afghanistan. So let's just go back in time a little bit more to World War II, because essentially that's still Cummings' generation. That is known as the greatest generation this nation's ever known, is World War I and World War II veterans. They're so prideful. I mean, so proud of everything they accomplished, and they should be. We should be still. Otherwise, we would be speaking German to this day. Um, they went abroad and took the fight to one of the worst dictators this world's ever known, and he had a plan for mass extermination. And these guys stopped that. And it baffles me that E. Cummings, being technically, I guess, one of those guys, is mocking what our country stands for. But again, it goes back to what his position was. Because I assure you, you can ask any veteran now, any frontline veteran, what their outlook is on this, and they would instantly be very upset, very disgruntled. And I assure you, he probably would not say this to a soldier, you know, face to face. The infantry, the cavalry, and the armored, those guys that are on the front lines, they have the most pride. You could put 10 soldiers in a row, same 10 of them up in a row, all in their dress uniforms. You could put 3 in there from a combat arms unit, and then the other 7 from various, we'll say, supply units, we'll say medical transportation units, like Cummings was. Just a mixture all the way across, you know, army wide, and you will undoubtedly be able to spot the infantrymen, the combat arms, you know, whomever, just by their uniform appearance. They take the most pride in their uniform attire. Not to take anything else away from the other soldiers, because they do as well, especially nowadays. But if one's going to be a little wishy-washy one way or the other one, typically it's going to be the people that are further back from the lines. And let's talk more about those infantry guys and what their duty is overseas. Or I'm sorry, not necessarily their duty, but their mentality. Because over here he says, what could be more beautiful than these heroic, happy dead who rushed like lions to the roaring slaughter? Okay, again, the way I'm depicting what he's saying is that these soldiers just rush blindly to the massacre for nothing. Well, I assure you, sir, that's the last thing on these guys' minds. They know what they're hard charging. They know what they're doing, and they're doing it with passion, with love of country. And if they pay the ultimate sacrifice, which a lot of them do, I don't want to say they're happy to do it, but they're proud to do it. I've lost several buddies, actually 10 to be exact. And every one of them, I'm sure, wouldn't have changed a thing. And so are their parents. Well, I mean, obviously the parents would want their child back more than anything, but these parents are extremely proud of their children, of their sons, who paid the ultimate sacrifice for our very liberties and freedoms that we enjoy still to this day. And so did these gentlemen. So they were not rushing to the slaughter. They were rushing to lay their lives down for what we have today. And then he goes on to say, they did not stop to think, they died instead. Then shall the voice of liberty be mute? Absolutely not. The voice of liberty will never be mute because of these guys. This is the voice of liberty. Them laying their lives down is resounding sound of freedom. Let liberty ring. Let freedom ring. That's this. That's these guys hard charging the mound and doing what they need to do to preserve our way of life. So E. Cummings, he speaks of all these things, but he's never actually seen that. And it boggles my mind how he could ignorantly say and naively say things like this. Essentially, what I feel he's trying to do here is he's throwing out propaganda. The few people that follow what he's saying here would essentially be the pilgrims that he's speaking of in the second line. they're the sheep. Um, People who don't know, firsthand, um, and just follow blindly. And unfortunately, we do have that way too much. And Cummings, if you kind of go off of what people are trying to say he did with this poem, to go against anti-politicians or their political movement, and then they're just throwing out, the American ideology and trying to fool people with this senseless pride. Yeah, I can kind of understand why he's doing this, because people do follow blindly. But then again, people who buy into this again are following blindly. Um, I don't ever wish anybody to ever have to see what war truly is. But on the same token, don't speak of what you don't know. Do not speak of these men's mentality, of their heroism, of their their love, their unmatched love for country. Um, so with that, Cummings, that's what I leave you with. And ultimately, that's my outlook on this. That's my presentation. I feel again, Cummings is speaking tremendously of what he doesn't know, and he shouldn't. And I assure you, any veteran, would speak otherwise of what he's saying here. And that's my presentation. That's my breakdown on Next to, of course, God America I. Do I think he's traitorous? No. Do I think he's guilty of treason? Anything even remotely close to that? Absolutely not. But he doesn't represent what Americans truly represent. And I've read numerous things about him, over the last probably 5 weeks, and they're all saying that, he quite frequently visited France, numerous times. Well, Cummings, from what it sounds like, represents more of the French ideology or mentality than the American. Uh, France is quite known for steering clear from war, which is excellent. War should absolutely, undoubtedly be the last stance, the last option. Absolutely. But once war is there, that's it. To secure peace is to prepare for war. So you can't have a peaceful society without war. You can't have freedom and liberty without war, and it's incredibly unfortunate. But on the same token, be proud and be thankful of those men who gave you the liberty to write something like this, and in a sense belittle or try to debunk what their mentality was. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.